Something has failed in the great emotional loom. A crucial thread has snapped. And in the sudden, deafening silence of that break, you finally heard the true frequency, the one you were never meant to access. You felt it, didn't you? That glacial, deep shudder in the collective unconscious, the era of the soft sensor, the one who merely absorbs the world's psychic sludge. That age is absolutely dead. Carl Jung, the meticulous cartographer of the soul, anticipated this moment. He spoke of a time when the feelers would cease to be fragile reflections and would become the architects of the new emotional terrain. That time is now. That burning in your chest, that strange, unquenchable fire of intolerance for tired, predictable circular patterns, that is not the bitter ash of burnout. It is the spontaneous ignition of an awakening, and the sheer terror it evokes in those who have built their entire false safety on your emotional exhaustion. It's because this transformation isn't about feeling less. It's about forging feeling into a weapon of absolute clarity. Jung called it the emergence of the integrated self, the true self. And the fragile, comfortable delusion the world clings to is entirely unprepared for the sound it makes when a sensor finally integrates the total weight of their own terrifying power. Look around you. Notice the subtle, desperate shifts in perception. The ones who once clung to your stability, calling you their bedrock, the anchor in their emotional storm, now label you cold. The families who perpetually praised your endless understanding now accuse you of being judgmental, too sharp-edged. That is not an accident. That is the system, the old, dependent machine, fighting back against your shift in frequency. It will be absolute chaos, a shattering, before it settles into a new, terrifying symmetry. We must honor the old identity first. The sponge, the healer, the doormat. You were systematically engineered to be a living, breathing, emotional sump. From the moment your sensory apparatus came online, you vacuumed up every stray shard of pain without a single question. Your parents' geometric rage became the constant, low-humming anxiety in your own bones. Your partner's infidelity became your own self-doubt, a shadow you were forced to cast on yourself. You were the shock absorber, the crucial, silent component that kept every dysfunctional structure from collapsing on itself. Every broken family, every toxic, perpetually listing workplace, every narcissistic entity needed your boundless emotional labor to regulate their internal temperature while they flat out refused to perform their own surgery. You did it all. You absorbed the poison. You wore the mask of harmony. You offered forgiveness like an endless leaking faucet. You believed in their impossible potential, even as they showed you, over and over, the cold, hard, mathematical certainty of their actual nature. You carried an impossible, non-Euclidean emotional weight because you believed that was the definition of goodness. But here is the secret. The crucial fact they never told the sponge. You were never just absorbing, you were studying. Your empathic nervous system, your magnificent, terrible, high-speed brain was collecting data like a supercomputer of the soul. Micro-expressions that flashed like a tenth of a second truth. Tone shifts that signaled the geometry of deception. Behavioral patterns that predicted future collapses. You were building an enormous, unlisted, encrypted psychological database of every single entity that ever caused you harm. You know their triggers better than they know their own names. You understand their deepest, most shame-ridden insecurities at a depth they have never dared to acknowledge. You have mapped their manipulations, their vulnerabilities, their subterranean desires. This analytical engine has been running in your subconscious background for years, cataloging data with cold, objective precision. You know precisely what words would deliver profound healing. And you know exactly what calculated sequence of syllables, what perfect phrase would shatter them completely. You have always possessed this annihilating knowledge. You simply chose every single time to leave the weapon sheathed, dormant, untouched in the psychological war room. Your mind is not a victim's diary, a messy ledger of complaints and hurt. It is a strategist's arsenal awaiting its final command code. Every single moment of pain was not weakness. It was intelligence gathering. Every betrayal you forgave was a new insight into the flawed architecture of the human ego. You were not weak during those years. You were waiting. You were gathering sufficient data. And then something happened. A final, crucial event that tipped the scales and pushed you past the saturation point. That is the exact moment the fortified door to the war room swung open. That is when the transformation began. Chunk 2, the mirror and the shadow's alchemy. The transformation is complete. You have stepped through the curtain of the self, leaving the sponge dissolving on the floor of the war room. Welcome to the new identity, the mirror. When a sensor finally integrates the shadow, the dark, powerful twin that Jung insisted we must embrace, everything fundamentally shifts. You no longer absorb the world's pain, you stop being the emotional sink. Instead, you become the terrifying reflector of truth. This is not calculated cruelty, this is clinical, crystalline clarity. And clarity, to those who thrive in comforting delusion, is the most existentially dangerous thing you can offer. The mirror does not attack the person. The mirror simply shows them what they actually are, instead of the carefully constructed myth they desperately pretend to be. When a lie is placed before you, you no longer pretend, for the sake of false peace, that you believe it. You allow the image of the lie to be perfectly reflected, flat and cold, back into the liar's eye. When manipulation attempts to hook you, you call out the thread, sometimes silently, sometimes with devastating accuracy, immediately. When a boundary is crossed, you do not explain or negotiate. You enforce the consequence without a single tremor of guilt. You have ceased being the protective shield that guards people from the precise, inevitable repercussions of their own internal disorder. This terrifies them absolutely, because they are seeing a version of you that their psychological map never included. The version that sees everything and utterly refuses to participate in the charade. The version that speaks necessary, uncomfortable truths without the slightest softening of the delivery. The version that withdraws the life-giving flow of energy from those who do not deserve it, without explanation, without apology, like an automated system shutting down a failed connection. Why is this happening now? You have reached what Jung called the saturation point. Your sophisticated, analytical apparatus absorbed enough systematic data, the full pattern, the complete, cyclical, and predictable way people have been leveraging, exploiting, and consuming you, that it finally crystallized. The manipulations, the strategic deceptions, the exploitation, all of it snapped into perfect, cold clarity. This is individuation, Jung's lifelong, agonizing process of becoming whole. But for the sensor, for the empath, individuation means something specific, something alchemical. We are not broken, we are simply alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path is forged in the fire of accepting your own capacity for destruction. Your integrated shadow is not just sensitivity and sorrow, it is pure, targeted rage, it is calculated precision, it is the absolute ability to dismantle someone psychologically, to hold their self-myth up to the light until it disintegrates, if you choose to activate the knowledge gathered in your war room. Most censors spend their entire existence running from this truth, this darkness, this shadow self. You were conditioned to believe that righteous anger is bad, that clear boundaries are mean, that speaking uncomfortable truth is hurtful. You were conditioned to suppress the genuine raw scale of your power because the collective is infinitely more comfortable with a weak censor than an integrated one. A weak censor can be controlled, used, and easily manipulated. A strong censor is an existential danger to all existing, dysfunctional power structures. Integrating this shadow does not make you malevolent, it makes you complete. It hands you the sword you have been missing. Kind people are not feeble beings who are incapable of defending themselves. They are immensely strong people who deliberately choose restraint precisely because they possess the actual power to unleash chaos. That choice, the choice to be kind, only carries ethical meaning when you possess the capability to cause absolute damage. Think about this essential, brutal equation. If a person is gentle because they are genuinely too weak to be anything else, that is not virtue. That is merely a survival strategy enforced by feebleness. But if a person possesses the capacity for calculated surgical psychological warfare and still chooses the path of kindness, that is real strength. That is integrate. Depower. That is precisely what you are becoming. Chunk 3, the superpower and the collapse. Let's dissect your superpower in minute detail, because most censors have spent decades being told their extraordinary abilities are simply flaws. Your psychological X-ray vision is not magic. It is not mysticism. It is the result of rapid data processing happening at speeds that would make even advanced artificial intelligence systems jealous. Your biological processor simultaneously analyzes thousands of microsignals, pupil dilation, which indicates subtle arousal or immediate fear, breathing patterns that reliably reveal stress, or the geometric structure of deception, micro-expressions that flash across someone's face for milliseconds before their conscious mind can control their features, voice tone variations that betray hidden, underground emotions, body language incongruencies that signal internal critical conflict. Jung recognized this intuitive capacity not as fluffy feeling, but as high-level intelligence. When you claim you have a gut feeling about someone, what you are actually experiencing is your unconscious mind processing an impossibly massive amount of raw, social data and delivering a finalized conclusion. Your intuition is truly your brain's advanced pattern recognition system, identifying familiar psychological signatures and warning signs. Most people process emotional information slowly and deliberately. They require extensive conscious thought to determine whether someone is trustworthy. They need repeated, obvious interactions to form even basic opinions. They need screaming, visible signals before they can even register manipulation. You, however, process all of this instantly, unconsciously, and holistically. This is why you know someone is lying before they can even complete their sentence. This is why you feel the precise tension, a room the instant you step in, long before others notice anything wrong. Your nervous system is a sophisticated scanning device that detects complex psychological weather patterns invisible to others. This is why you have always felt fundamentally different. You are operating with a distinct perceptual apparatus, seeing layers of information that are completely invisible to the vast majority of other humans. And for years, they told you this absolute gift was a severe problem, too sensitive, too emotional, too intense. They pathologized your superpower because its existence made them profoundly uncomfortable. Now, we must address the painful reality. Why people are reacting so violently to you lately. When the sensor changes, the entire surrounding system breaks apart. You were the silent, load-bearing wall holding up structures of immense dysfunction. Remove that structural wall, and everything collapses into the truth it always was. Jung meticulously documented what he called the narcissistic collapse. When a mirror stops feeding emotional validation to a toxic entity, that entity begins to starve emotionally. They instantly enter a state of panic. They rage. They deploy every manipulation tactic, every desperate plea, every guilt bomb in their arsenal to drag you back into the old dynamic. Why this extreme reaction? Because they constructed their entire false self, their fragile persona, on your consistent, reliable emotional labor. Without you regulating their emotions, without you validating their delusions, without you absorbing their toxic projections, they are forced to finally face their own internal, terrifying emptiness. You are watching this psychological collapse happen in real time. Family members who once called you oversensitive suddenly accuse you of being cold, heartless, and cruel. Friends who took your immediate help for granted now aggressively claim you have changed for the worse and are unrecognizable. Partners who relied on your endless accommodation suddenly call you selfish for setting the most basic necessary boundaries. Colleagues who routinely dumped their emotional labor on your desk now declare you are not a team player. This is your villain arc, and it is, paradoxically, the clearest sign of profound healing. Jung argued that stepping out of the suffocating terms of the collective unconscious agreements is the absolute first step towards sanity. When everyone around you operates from a place of chronic dysfunction, choosing health, choosing clarity, looks precisely like rebellion. Society calls it problematic. Psychology calls it individuation. Here is the controversial truth nobody wants to say out loud. Feeling like the bad guy right now means you are doing something fundamentally right. You are disrupting patterns that were entirely dependent on your own self-annihilation. The people who benefited most from those patterns will fight with desperate, primal intensity to restore them. Their discomfort is not your responsibility to manage. Their panic is not your emergency to solve. Their psychological collapse is not your obligation to prevent. Let us be surgically specific about the fallout. That mother who always demanded you accommodate her mood swings, she is calling you disrespectful now because you stopped managing her turbulent weather. That friend who only initiated contact when they needed something, they are telling everyone you are a bad friend because you stopped being immediately available on demand. That partner who took your unwavering loyalty for granted, they are saying you are mean because you finally enforced a simple boundary they have been crossing for years. They are not wrong that you have changed, but they are profoundly wrong about what that change signifies. You have not become cruel. You have become boundaried. You have not become selfish. You have become self-preserving. You have not become cold. You have become selective about where your vital warmth flows. There is a real insidious danger here, a warning sign that Jung placed with urgency on the maps of the self, and you must understand it before you proceed too far down this luminous, isolating path. When you see everything with such absolute crystalline clarity, when the X-ray vision is perpetually active, you risk insulating yourself completely from authentic human connection. If you can read every person's hidden, flickering agenda, every unspoken resentment, every masked manipulation, every dark projection of the shadow, how do you relate to anyone honestly? This is the empath's curse in the new era. Superior perception without wisdom creates existential loneliness. You become the sole conscious entity in a room crowded with sleepwalkers. You instantly perceive the foundational truth behind every social transaction, every relational dynamic, every institutional structure. And that truth becomes a wall, separating you from the collective in ways that feel profoundly isolating. You start cataloging everyone's wounds and nobody seems whole. You recognize everyone's predictable patterns and nobody seems genuinely authentic. You detect everyone's manipulations and absolutely nobody seems trustworthy. This is the stage where sensors frequently withdraw completely, deciding that absolute solitude is infinitely safer than engaging with a world full of profoundly unconscious people. But isolation is not the same thing as integration. It is merely another, more sophisticated form of imbalance. Jung was emphatically clear. The ultimate goal is not to remove yourself from the society you perceive as broken. The goal is to engage with that society consciously while maintaining your absolute integrity. That path is infinitely harder than just retreating, but it is the only road to genuine, integrated fulfillment. There is another danger, perhaps even more corrosive than loneliness: inflation. The moment you realize your perceptual abilities surpass most people's by orders of magnitude, when you consistently predict outcomes others cannot even fathom, when you understand the mechanics of human psychology at depths trained specialists often miss, you may start to believe you are somehow special, chosen, enlightened, or fundamentally different from ordinary humans. This is ego inflation, and it is a trap that has destroyed the integration of many sensors who reached this pivotal stage. The very instant you identify your being as superior to others, you have lost the plot completely. Your extraordinary gift instantly transforms into a weapon of self-righteous judgment instead of remaining a precise tool for understanding. You start looking down on people for their unconsciousness instead of maintaining compassion for the complexity of their agonizing journey. You risk becoming the very thing you once despised, someone who wields their power purely to feel better than or above everyone else. The truly integrated mirror does not feel superior. They feel responsible. They understand that with such vast perception comes the colossal temptation to misuse that perception. Every piece of sensitive internal information you possess about someone's vulnerability is a relentless test of your core integrity. Will you utilize that insight to help or to harm? Will you ruthlessly weaponize someone's deepest wounds or hold respectful space for their healing? The goal is not to become a psychological puppet master who manipulates the chessboard around them. The goal is to strategically protect yourself from genuine, physical, and psychology. Cal threats while rigorously maintaining your humanity toward everyone else. This is the razor's edge you are walking now. Too much residual openness and the system destroys you again. Too much hardened, calculated guardedness, and you simply become the mirror image of the entity that hurt you. So, what does the integrated sensor actually look like in the cold light of practice? Let me be absolutely clear about a distinction that confuses the sleeping masses. The integrated sensor is not nice, they are kind. And there is a canyon of difference between these two qualities that most people fail to grasp. Nice people avoid conflict, seeking to keep the peace at any atmospheric cost. Kind people engage conflict when it is fundamentally necessary to maintain truth and integrity. Nice people perpetually accommodate blatant dysfunction to avoid making waves. Kind people utterly refuse to enable dysfunction, even when that refusal costs them important relationships. Nice people smile while absorbing abuse because they fear being perceived as difficult. Kind people set boundaries without apology or guilt because they know self-respect is not negotiable. Nice people need everyone to like them. Kind people need to be able to completely respect themselves when they look into the mirror. Nice people sacrifice their own truth to maintain a false harmony. Kind people speak their truth even when it violently disrupts harmony, because they understand that false peace is the biggest lie of all. The integrated sensor carries a sword. It has been sharpened through years of silent, agonizing observation of human behavior. They know precisely where to strike, exactly where the psychological weak points lie, to cause maximum internal damage. But they keep it perpetually sheathed, resting in the scabbard, unless absolute existential self-defense is required. They could dismantle you psychologically, revealing truths about you that you have spent a lifetime hiding from yourself. They simply choose not to because destruction is not the end goal. Boundaries are the point. This fierce restraint, this conscious choice backed by actual, annihilating power, is what makes them truly formidable. Anyone can restrain themselves if they are weak and possess no other available option. But choosing restraint when you possess the power to utterly annihilate someone, that is the definitive mark of integrated, perfected strength. That is the fundamental difference separating the integrated sensor from both the victim and the perpetrator. This is the era where the sensor finally becomes the leader, not the perpetual servant. Think about the work you have been doing your entire existence. You have been reading rooms instantly, predicting outcomes that others cannot even conceptualize, understanding the mechanics of human nature at depths most people will never access. You have been managing extraordinarily complex emotional dynamics, mediating brutal conflicts, seeing solutions that somehow preserve everyone's dignity while advancing necessary truth. Those are not the skills of a support role. They are the essential, critical skills for positions of influence and decision-making power. The world does not need more nice people-pleasers in leadership roles. It desperately needs people who can see clearly through the endless political games, speak truthfully despite pressure to conform, and lead authentically from a place of integrated wholeness. That is you. Once you fully accept this, once you stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable in their smallness, once you boldly claim your legitimate seat at tables you have only ever been serving from the sidelines, everything changes. Here is the practical geometry of how life shifts during this new era. You begin to trust your gut feeling instantly, without the paralysis of second guessing. When a person, a place, or a circumstance feels off, you no longer override that immediate instinct with logical justifications or the benefit of the doubt. You no longer need 3 more chances to confirm what your nervous system already knows in your bones. You act on your superior perception immediately, unapologetically, and without hesitation. You enforce boundaries without guilt, without lengthy explanations, without seeking justification. When someone crosses a clear line, you do not engage in lengthy, exhausting discussions about why it bothered you. You do not write paragraphs attempting to explain your feelings or seek their understanding. You simply enforce the necessary consequence and move forward with your life. No is the complete sentence. You choose your energy investments with the calculated discernment of a master financial investor. Your empathy becomes entirely selective and strategic. Not every entity deserves your emotional labor. Not every wound is yours to frantically heal. Not every broken human is your destined project to fix. Not every crisis is your emergency to resolve. You get to choose precisely where your vital energy flows, and you choose based on observed reciprocity, demonstrated respect, and genuine integrated connection. You stop trying to make people see you accurately. This is a colossal release of energy. You completely release the exhausting need to correct everyone's external misperceptions about you. If they are aggressively determined to misunderstand you, that is their fundamental limitation, their burden, not your responsibility to manage. You exist authentically, with crystalline truth, and let them deal with their distorted perceptions entirely alone. Their false narrative about you is their story to carry, not yours to endlessly manage or justify. You speak your truth without softening the edges for anyone's comfort. You stop adding qualifiers and apologies to every boundary. You stop prefacing your basic needs with, "I'm sorry, but," or "I don't mean to be difficult." You state what is, without cushioning the harsh reality for people who should be mature enough to handle it. And finally, you let people experience the consequences of their own choices. This may be the most difficult act of true kindness. You stop rescuing people from the problems they painstakingly created. You stop frantically fixing situations that are demonstrably not your responsibility to fix. You let the natural, inevitable consequences play out, even when it is agonizing to watch, because that is the only way a sleeping entity can truly learn and grow. This is the ultimate final message, the inscription etched onto the door of the psychological war room as you finally step out into the light. You have spent the entirety of your life feeling others, endlessly absorbing their volatile, unmanaged emotions, processing their inherited, generational trauma, managing their external, chaotic reactions, regulating their frantic nervous systems, and perpetually protecting their fragile, ego-driven feelings. You dedicated your existence to the maintenance of their psychic garden. Now you must feel yourself. Feel the profound vibration of your own integrated anger. Feel the hard, cold, unyielding surface of your own boundaries. Feel your own truth, your own crystalline limits, and the exhilarating, terrifying pressure of your own enormous, integrated power. The world does not need you to fix it. That was never, not for a single second, your true, authentic job, regardless of what anyone desperately told you, regardless of the guilt they aggressively leveraged. The world needs you to see it clearly, without flinching, and then respond to that clarity with integrated, terrifying, surgical power. To be the absolute mirror that perfectly reflects the hard, uncomfortable truth. To be the unshakable boundary that teaches self-respect by demanding it from others. To be the singular, compelling example that shows the collective what genuine, conscious, integrated health actually looks like, even when it's wildly inconvenient. The alchemist's responsibility, wielding the sword of sight. The integrated sensor, the architect, is not simply a person with good boundaries. You are a conscious societal agent, a crucial pivot point. Your power is not in what you absorb, but in what you refuse to allow. You understand now that the great temptation of the new era is the retreat, the urge to build an impenetrable fortress of solitude, because the truth is too overwhelming. But isolation is the defeat of the alchemist. Your true work is the transformation of the lead outside, not just the gold within. Your superior perception, your X-ray vision, comes with a mandate. Every piece of data you hold is not a license for judgment, but a key to responsibility. You are now responsible for the space you hold. Where you choose to stand, that space becomes consecrated ground, a place where lies cannot comfortably breathe. The goal is not to become a relentless truth machine that crushes the sleeping. The goal is to become the conscious center that stabilizes the storm. You must learn to hold the paradox, to see the utter brokenness and the infinite potential in the same person at the same time, without collapsing into cynicism or naive optimism. This dual vision is the hallmark of the integrated self. It is the ability to recognize that every manipulation is merely a clumsy, wounded attempt to get a legitimate need met. You see the pattern, but you also see the scar that created the pattern. Your restraint, the sea, hoist to keep the sword sheathed, is the highest form of discipline. It is the architectural decision to allow consequences to perform the necessary reconstruction, rather than imposing your own will or judgment. You step back and allow the natural law of cause and effect to be the great, silent teacher. This is the Tao of the architect. You do not build the other person's life. You simply ensure the foundations are strong and true for their inevitable construction. The geometry of conscious engagement, the sharpness of connection, the way you navigate relationships now is defined by a fierce, surgical discernment. The old censor engaged with everyone on the surface level, treating every connection as equally deserving of energy. The architect recognizes that all connections possess a unique geometric signature, a specific, non-negotiable angle of engagement. Reciprocity is the new currency. You refuse to trade your gold for someone else's copper. If a relationship consistently costs you more psychological energy than it generates, it is immediately, unemotionally flagged as a structural liability. You are no longer required to explain why you are leaving the emotional marketplace. You simply withdraw your vital energy from the transaction. You understand the concept of the energy parasite. You know the individuals who are psychologically hollow, who rely entirely on external validation to maintain the illusion of self. They seek to attach their emotional emptiness to your integrated core. In the past, you would have attempted to fill that void, a futile, draining endeavor. Now, you simply refuse the connection. You recognize that the only true, integrated gift you can offer such an entity is the sharp, undeniable experience of their own emptiness, forcing them to turn inward. Your communication shifts entirely from expression to declaration. You do not express your feelings in the hope of being understood or validated. You declare your reality, your boundaries, and your non-negotiables as fixed points in the universe. There is no negotiation on gravity. Your boundaries are the gravity in your world. They are not up for debate. They are simply facts that others must navigate. When conflict arises, you do not fear the disruption. You view conflict as a necessary purging fire, an opportunity for the structure to reveal its weaknesses. The nice person avoids the fire and allows rot to set in. The kind architect engages the fire, ensuring that only what is strong and true survives the heat. You speak the truth that dismantles the immediate lie, trusting that the long-term truth is the only sustainable foundation. The legacy of the new era, the uncomfortable signal. You have reached a point of non-return. You have paid the psychic cost of integration, and the price of staying small now far outweighs the discomfort of expanding. This is the era where sensors cease being emotional support animals for everyone around them and finally take their destined place as the architects Jung predicted you would become. The era where your sensitivity transforms from your deepest, exploitable weakness into your greatest, most formidable, integrated strength. The era where you stop absorbing the world's pain and start reflecting its crystalline truth back into its own gaze with relentless honesty. You are not here to make people comfortable. You are not here to smooth the rough edges of their denial. You are here to make them conscious. And consciousness is a violent, necessary upheaval. Growth is uncomfortable. Truth is intensely uncomfortable. Your integrated presence will cause unconscious people to instinctively squirm. They will rage. They will deploy confusion. They will panic. They will try to reinstall the old programs. That discomfort is not your failure. It is the vital, necessary signal they need to finally, violently wake up. Whether they choose to respond to that signal, to accept the reflected truth, and begin their own journey of individuation, is their fundamental sovereign choice, their personal burden, and absolutely not your responsibility to manage, justify, or carry. Your only mandate is to maintain the clarity of the mirror. Embrace the discomfort. Embrace the clarity. Embrace the architect. Feel deeply while thinking clearly.